Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Right.
And this one is actually coming straight from a listener request, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
And it has to do with fencing
All right.
and some recent news about fencing gear regulations here in the U.S. So,
Okay.
full disclosure, I don't know much about fencing,
Okay.
but this particular request is about a clarification that USA Fencing has issued on some equipment rules.
Right.
So we're going right to the news article from the USA Fencing website.
Great.
And what I thought was really interesting was that it's not a rule change, it's a clarification.
Right.
So maybe you can walk us through what that means exactly.
Well, the article starts off by hammering home how safe fencing is.
Mm-hmm.
And they make a very strong case.
Okay.
They even go so far as to compare it to other sports and say it's one of the safest sports out there.
Really? Wow. So
Right.
what are they doing that other sports aren't? I mean, what makes it so safe?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to the protective gear.
Yeah.
And particularly the mask is very robust. And the rules and the etiquette of the sport is all designed to minimize any chance of injury.
Interesting.
So even the weapons themselves, they're designed to bend on impact.
Yeah.
And fencers are trained from day one to not be reckless at all in their actions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a combination of the equipment, the training, and just the culture, really, that makes it a very safe sport.
That's great to know. Okay, so getting into the article a bit more, it zeroes in on this particular rule, M.25.2,
Yeah.
which has to do with the direction that the flaps open on certain pieces of gear.
Correct.
So what does the rule actually say?
So basically it says that the flaps on your jacket, your knickers, and your lame, and that's the conductive vest that registers the touches, they all have to open in a specific direction, depending on whether you're a right-handed or a left-handed fencer.
Okay.
So if you're a right-handed fencer, those flaps need to open from right to left.
Yes.
If you're a left-handed fencer, the flaps need to open from left to right.
And that's not just an arbitrary thing, right? It's all
Yeah.
tied back to this concept of safety that they were talking about in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
It has to do with, well, they use this analogy in the article of if you think of a fencer in the on-guard position,
Mm-hmm.
you want the flaps to be facing away from your opponent.
Got it.
So it minimizes the chance of their weapon getting caught in those flaps.
Interesting. So that's where this clarification comes in, because the article makes a point of saying that this isn't a new rule.
Exactly.
This is a clarification of an existing rule.
Right.
So why now? Why do you think USA Fencing felt the need to issue this clarification?
Well, that's a great question. And I don't know if they explicitly say in the article, but there's a couple of possibilities that come to mind.
Okay.
One, maybe there was some inconsistency in how the referees were enforcing this rule across different competitions.
Yeah.
Or maybe there was some genuine confusion amongst fencers themselves about what constituted compliant gear.
So this is about getting everyone on the same page, making sure everyone is applying it the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And I think if we connect it back to this idea of safety that we're talking about at the beginning,
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Okay.
It's about eliminating any ambiguity and making sure everyone understands that this is an important detail.
So let's play this out a little bit. What if a fencer walks onto the strip with gear that doesn't meet this clarified rule?
Mm-hmm.
What are the potential consequences? The article mentions a few risks, but I'm curious from your experience, what could actually happen?
Sure. Well, I mean, imagine about in progress, the action's fast and furious.
Yeah.
Suddenly, the opponent's blade gets caught in a flap that's facing the wrong way.
Oh.
Best case scenario, it's a distraction. Maybe there's a brief halt in the action.
Okay.
But worst case, you're looking at a potentially dangerous situation.
Wow.
The blade could deflect unpredictably, which could cause an injury, or it could even snag and pull on the garment,
Oh.
which could lead to a fall or some other mishap.
So it sounds like these seemingly small details can have a ripple effect, even in a sport that's already designed with safety in mind.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head.
Huh.
Fencing is very safe, but it relies on every element working together,
Okay.
right down to which way a flap opens.
I'm kind of realizing as we're talking about this that when I first read this article, my thought was, oh, this seems like such a minor thing.
Right.
But now that we're talking about it and seeing how it fits into this bigger picture of safety,
Yeah.
I realize that this clarification was probably needed.
Yeah, I think what's fascinating to me is this kind of situation, it isn't unique to fencing. You see it in all sorts of fields where seemingly insignificant details can have huge consequences.
That's a really good point. It makes you think about what other hidden safety implications are lurking out there in everyday things that we take for granted.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, like just think about something as simple as a door handle. The shape, the material, the placement, all these seemingly minor design choices, they actually can have a big impact on accessibility and safety.
Right.
A poorly designed handle could make it really difficult for someone with arthritis to open a door, or it could even be a safety hazard if it's prone to breaking.
That's true. You don't really think about those things until something goes wrong.
Right.
And that's why I think this clarification from USA Fencing is so important. It's raising awareness and getting people to think about the details, even in a sport that's considered to be incredibly safe.
Yeah.
The article also talks about the role of the referees in enforcing these safety standards.
Right.
So what can you tell us about that? What do they do?
So referees, they play a crucial role in maintaining safety on the strip.
Okay.
They're not just there to call touches and enforce the rules of the bout,
Yeah.
but they're also trained to meticulously inspect the fencer's gear before each bout.
Oh, wow.
So they're looking for any potential hazards or equipment that doesn't meet the regulations.
So they're kind of like a final safety check before the fencers even cross blades.
Exactly. They're like the guardians of safety, making sure everything's in order before the action begins.
Huh. And this attention to detail, it goes beyond the equipment itself, right?
Absolutely.
They're also watching the fencer's behavior during the bout,
Yeah.
looking for anything reckless or unsafe.
Right. Any sign that something could lead to an injury.
It's interesting that you bring up that behavior aspect because the article also talks about this idea, a culture of safety in fencing. What do they mean by that?
Well, I think it gets at the heart of what makes fencing different from some other sports.
Okay.
It's not just about winning at all costs.
Yeah.
There's this deep-rooted respect for safety that's ingrained in the culture of the sport.
Okay.
So fencers are taught from day one to prioritize safety, both their own and their opponents.
So it's like a mindset.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
It translates into a heightened awareness of their surroundings, a disciplined approach to the sport, and a willingness to follow the rules.
So it sounds like that culture of safety is as important as the equipment and the regulations themselves.
Absolutely. It's the foundation upon which everything else is built. I mean, you can have the most advanced safety gear in the world,
Mm-hmm.
but if the fencers aren't trained to use it properly and act responsibly, accidents can still happen.
That's a good point. It's kind of like safety isn't just about the stuff. It's about the people and the culture.
Exactly. And that's where organizations like USA Fencing, they play a vital role
Okay.
by issuing clarifications like this one.
Right.
They're not just dictating rules, they're actually reinforcing this culture of safety
Mm-hmm.
and ensuring that it continues to be a core value of the sport.
You know what I think this discussion is highlighting is this idea that we often focus on those big, obvious safety precautions.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's the seemingly minor details that can make all the difference.
Absolutely. Whether it's the direction of a flap on a fencing jacket or the placement of a door handle,
Right.
these small details can have big consequences.
Absolutely. So do you have any personal experience with this, maybe in fencing or just in other areas of your life,
Yeah.
where a seemingly insignificant detail turned out to be more important than you initially thought?
You know, I think back to my early days as a fencer before I really fully grasped the importance of that culture of safety that we were just talking about.
Okay.
I was so focused on winning that I sometimes overlooked those seemingly minor details.
Yeah.
I remember one particular bout. I was fencing against a much more experienced opponent,
Mm-hmm.
and I was so determined to score a touch that I just lunged recklessly
Oh.
without any regard for proper form or technique.
And what happened?
Thankfully, nothing serious.
Okay.
My opponent was skilled enough to parry my attack and avoid any contact.
Shoo.
But the referee immediately stopped the bout and gave me a stern warning about the dangers of reckless actions.
Wow, I bet that was a wake-up call.
It was. It made me realize that even in a sport as safe as fencing, one careless move could have serious consequences.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure that experience shaped your approach to fencing and to safety in general going forward.
Absolutely. It taught me the importance of respecting the rules, prioritizing safety, and always being mindful of the details, no matter how small they may seem.
That's a powerful lesson, and it applies far beyond the fencing strip.
Yeah, for sure. It's a reminder that safety isn't just about following the rules.
Mm-hmm.
It's about cultivating a mindset of awareness, responsibility, and attention to detail.
Very well said. Okay, so to bring this back to our main topic. Okay, so let's recap a little bit what we learned about this clarification from USA Fencing.
Yeah?
We started by talking about the rule itself, M.25.2,
Right.
which has to do with which way those flaps on your fencing gear should open based on if you're right-handed or left-handed.
Correct. And as we discussed, it's not just about aesthetics or looking good, it's really about functionality.
Right.
Those flaps need to open away from your opponent to minimize the risk of their weapon getting caught up in them.
Exactly. Then we talked about the reason behind the clarification. While it seems like this rule isn't new, there might have been some inconsistency in how it was being applied.
Right.
So this statement from USA Fencing clears up any confusion and makes sure that everybody's on the same page when it comes to safety.
Exactly. It's a good way to bring everyone together, I think.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting is that this whole conversation went way beyond fencing.
Yeah.
We talked about how those little details can have a huge impact on safety, not just in sports, but in everyday life.
It's true. And you know what I love about these deep dives?
What's that?
We can start with something really specific, like one rule
Right.
in one sport. And it just opens up this whole new way of thinking
Yeah.
about safety and risk in general.
And it makes you realize that safety isn't just about the big, obvious precautions.
Right.
It's about the little things that you might not even notice at first that
Absolutely.
really make a big difference.
Yeah.
It's about creating this whole culture of safety where everybody is invested in making sure that nobody gets hurt.
Exactly. And I think that's what this clarification from USA Fencing is really all about. It's not just about laying down the law.
Right.
It's about reinforcing that culture of safety that the sport already has and reminding everyone that even the smallest details matter.
It's a good reminder for all of us, I think.
Absolutely.
This has been such an interesting deep dive.
It really has.
I feel like I learned so much about fencing
Yeah.
and the importance of paying attention to details.
Right.
Not just on the strip, but also just in life in general.
Absolutely.
So a huge thank you to our expert for joining us today
It's been my pleasure.
and for sharing all this fascinating insight. And to you, our listener, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time. Until then, stay curious and remember, safety is in the details.